Madam Chair. Teresa.
Yes. Yes.
So I printed one.
That might be the page for this one.
Yeah. It's a workshop.
Okay.
Yeah, it might make the most.
No, makes sense.
They're doing.
You might have to go.
The Olympics is 15.
So she didn't run fast.
Oh, sorry. I don't have her number.
What about John Cody?
Oh, he's not coming.
No, he's not coming.
John.
No, we need some more in people.
I mean,
He could have come by noon, but we still need a four.
They don't have to do it.
It should be back up.
she's not.
Working?
Oh, I hear her.
I had
Did you get any? Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're gonna send me this again. You don't have a form yet.
I can tell. That's, yeah.
That's what we're waiting for. We have another member coming.
Cheers.
He won't be the one.
You can have this one.
So we're going to have a
Careful, water.
Okay, good evening. We want to start the meeting tonight, what is it, it's a working meeting? The only thing on our agenda today is Caruso. So, I'm gonna get a roll call, there's only 4 of us here. Linda? Can I get a roll call? She's on me.
Yes. Teresa,
Here.
Randall,
Yeah.
Benjamin,
Here.
Bettina,
Here, Linda.
John,
He's, absent.
okay, and Valerie.
She's absent.
Okay, you have a quorum.
Excuse me. Okay. All right, so good evening, everyone. Today is Thursday, November the 30th. I don't know that. I'm calling the meeting into order at 4:10 PM. So do you guys want to?
Before we start.
Oh, okay, we have a resolution that we have to approve before we start anything. Here's a resolution requiring a replenish of escrow for the depot district, really. In the amount of $5,000. We already have the check. We just need the resolution. So can I get a motion?
I make a motion for a resolution.
Okay, and I will second that motion. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, pass. Okay, yeah.
Evening, Madam Chair, members of the
Oh,
board.
wait, just one thing. There is something that we would like for you to explain. We saw posters today. Brandon,
Yes,
you're the one that
yeah,
sent them to me.
yeah, I just wanted to, the city attorney to make a comment.
Right.
Well,
Okay, Sure, so, we received photos of posters that have been put up around the city saying that, you know, this proposed action would actually increase the number of trucks going to and from the waterfront. And so there were some concerns about the characterization of it, so I'm just gonna refer the issue to the engineer who has reviewed the numbers and explain why, that while the numbers might be accurate, the characterization might be incorrect.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I was shown a picture briefly of the poster. And just to go over the kind of the truck volumes, the truck trip generations that have been proposed as part of the application. So
Excuse
the,
me, Ryan, could you send that to us?
I can ask, I do not have a copy of the photo. I guess I can read, if it's all right with everybody, I'll
Sure.
read what the poster says. So it says, traffic/safety nightmare. If our planning board,
Oh, you said it this morning.
traffic safety nightmare, if our planning board approves Coloruso's proposed haul road, up to 284 80,000-pound gravel trucks Monday through Friday crossing 9 and 9G, Amtrak, rail and pedestrian and vehicle waterfront crossings, plus up to 96 retail gravel trucks crossing 9 and 9G. Daily crossings up to 380 on Route 9, 284 to 380 on Route 9G, 284 at Amtrak and waterfront crossings. And then it goes on to say, what can you do? And it talks about this evening's, this evening's, workshop meeting. So, you know, this was shared and basically it was asked of me to comment on the numbers that are proposed, and let me just, so it's, you know, indicating up to 284, trucks, gravel trucks, per day, it appears to indicate, and the project records show what's been submitted by the board is, the applicant is proposing a maximum condition of 284 trips per day. So that's 142 trucks per day going to and coming back from the dock for the 284. That is an accurate number of what has been proposed by the applicant for a maximum condition. Now that number is what was reviewed by the town of Greenport in their seeker review, and what was included in their determination of significance. The applicant has also provided after the seeker review was completed in 2020, information on how many days they are essentially meeting that maximum condition, which is presented in the 2020 report from Craig and Manning. But I think one thing that, you know, should be clarified to the board is, while this is a number, these are trip generations that are proposed solely for the haul road. So under the current condition, I think the question was asked is what's allowed on city streets? And under the current condition, with use of the city streets, there is no limit. So they provided actual truck volumes. However, under the current situation, or if the haul road proposal is withdrawn or denied, if there's a situation where it does not exist, there is no limit to truck trips per day. So they are, under my understanding of the use of public streets, the applicant is allowed to use the city streets to run 600 trips per day. However, what has been proposed and where the 284 comes into play is if the haul road is approved, the applicant has said that the maximum situation would be 284. And therefore, that is what was reviewed under seeker and what is being an upward limit for the city planning board to look at for consideration of the conditional use permit. So if the haul road were to be approved and the applicant were to exceed that limit, that would be outside of the seeker review that was completed and outside of the review. It would change, potentially substantially change the information that was that, that the planning board made their decision based on. And I believe, and I looked to the applicant's team to confirm, that it's been mentioned at a meeting that if approved and if the Hall Road is constructed, the applicant has agreed to not run any trucks on city streets other than the two contingency situations that the applicant has proposed.
That's one of the things we're talking about tonight. I'm not sure we're there yet.
Okay. So that's a topic of conversation. However, I hope that clarifies, but if I can, speak further, please let me know.
Board, any questions on that?
Thank you. So in other words, it is not an increase, but I can understand how a lot of people could see it as an increase because they have not yet, as you had said to me before, have reached that maximum.
Right.
Right. So I can see how a lot of people could think that if we give them the road, they will increase, but that is what's allowed.
Right.
Teresa,
Yes.
we just want to make.
Oh, what's your name?
J.R. Hefner, Calarusos. We just need to make it clear that the Hall Road is not needed to maximize. the
Exactly.
business
Thank you. for
At all,
adding that.
and that's what he had just said. I
Well,
just
that,
wanna make
yeah, that
sure
was the last
That
part.
everybody understands,
Those numbers
you don't need it.
You can
kind
even
of
go over
emphasize
that.
how beneficial the Hall Road is, because those trucks will be on the Hall Road and not on city streets.
But without it, you can go as many as you like.
Right.
Yeah, there's no limit.
So,
Well, and I think if I may just clarify it to the board as well, it's my understanding that even if the Hall Road is approved, and maybe Victoria, you can speak to this as well. If the Hall Road is approved, unless it would be a condition of the conditional use permit, if it was a condition, I don't know, and yield to legal counsel and its enforceability. However, if the Hall Road is approved, there's also, they're public city streets. I do not believe there's anything that says that Calaruso could not use city streets
along with.
the Hall Road.
It would be,
Based on my understanding, however, I think that's more of a legal.
that's correct,
question.
and it
That's
would be driven by the economic benefit Calaruso would receive from using the Hall Road.
Which is
Faster.
significant, which is significant.
Yeah, the trip distance is closer, it's less fuel, it's less wear on the trucks, less wear on tires, it's. keep
That's
the
why
truck
we're
drivers
building
on-
it.
Yeah, city streets, so it's significant financial and economic benefits to the company, so that's sort of where the self-policing comes in.
The other thing that's misleading about the poster is that not only did the town of Greenport make that seeker finding, but the city sued and said the seeker finding was inadequate and lost. And the court said that all of the seeker work on traffic and safety was already done and adequate. That's very misleading to the public. It's.
But just to reiterate, we're saying that, if the whole road were to be approved, you would have 0 trucks on the road.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Well,
Is that correct?
Already.
No,
No, so,
Other, right now is where we're looking at the exemption that you want, I'm saying excluding those, you'd have 0 trucks.
but we'll get to that point, I think, because there's just a few things I
Well,
kind of.
that's what you've proposed, that's what you've said.
So-
You've said absent the 2 exceptions that you're looking for, you would, and local deliveries.
Right, and
You
so,
would use the Hall Road.
we never defined the exceptions though, and we have a lot to
But
say
that's not his
tonight.
question.
What?
His question was, you committed as part of your application, with the exception of exceptions, which we're still discussing, not to use city roads except for certain identified situations.
and so
Except we-
all
go ahead.
I like to do is just clarify that, so. What,
I'm just looking for you to clarify, that's what your application is, right?
no, that's not written in the application.
That was certainly written in the application.
So we understand.
No, I think
So you.
what's being conflated is,
So tell me.
yeah, so.
Explain it.
So let's just lay a little background. TJ, I think just introduce yourself. Let's lay a little background. Let's get to the exceptions and
Yeah.
let's talk about it
All right,
and make this a real workshop.
great. So I'm TJ Rowain. I'm here representing Calaruso. So the first thing we wanted to talk about was at the last meeting, there was a request from the board that we extend the time in which the board has to make a decision on the project, which was looking for us to grant that. And so what I wanted to make clear, and as I'm sure the board knows, is that this board is currently subject to a court order to issue or to render a decision promptly on the application. So we can't sort of grant any sort of extension here. We don't have that authority. They would have to go to
Okay,
court.
disagree. If you work with the board and say that you agree to an extension, the court's not gonna overrule that decision. So that's just,
If
that's
that's your
just
legal
untrue.
advice to the board, then that's fine.
we are working towards a decision. We've asked you to waive the 62-day time period after the close of the public hearing, and that is not something the court said could not happen. You can voluntarily agree to waive that.
No, we-
All I'm saying is we can't
Okay.
modify the court's order, and we can't
We're not
step
asking
in.
you to modify the court's order.
And you haven't asked to modify it either.
Okay, did the court?
It says issue a decision forthwith and it's been 5 months. We can't change that.
Is the 62 days because of the closing of the public hearing?
It is.
So it has nothing to do with what the court is saying.
The court wants you to
Yes, it
continue
does.
processing the application
Exactly.
forthwith, which
Right.
you've diligently been processing
we'll
it.
continue.
You held a public hearing, we're holding special meetings like the one tonight. So
Right, and I'm not
I
saying the board is
disagree
not,
with the applicant's characterization that they cannot grant this courtesy extension.
I'm just saying they just don't have the authority to modify the court's order.
But we're not asking you to modify the court's order. The court
Yes, you
can-
are.
No.
Okay.
Because what does it mean
I
if we,
think
what does it
so.
mean if we, what does it mean if we waive the 62?
We're here to talk about the project, and you're coming in, again, arguing about procedures and
Well,
and
but-
what your
so-
application says.
But so are we to take it that you're not in agreement with this? You're not in agreement with the extension? That's what it sounds like to me.
We
No,
can't.
but we don't have any say in it
We
at all.
can't.
We can't,
But you do, but
You say,
you chose not to.
you say you can.
no, we can't.
They're saying they
Chose you
can't.
can't.
But-
You chose not
But what? I just think it's so misguided because A, if the planning board fails to make a decision after 62 days, there's no automatic approval. And so you'd have to take us to court again to force a decision, which is not in your interest because the planning board's working here to try and get to a decision.
And
I
the board is
understand.
under a court order to immediately, without delay, render a
They're
decision.
not asking for a delay, they're asking for time to render a decision.
I know you don't litigate,
It's been
Victoria, but let me just,
Okay, that's really unfair.
let me just explain something to you. We can't waive any time limit without impairing our right to a forthwith decision that's already a final decision. That is our legal opinion that we can't do it. And we're not gonna talk about it anymore. We can't do it because it impairs, it impairs the phrase forthwith. If we waive a time limit and you don't make a decision for 2 years, the court's gonna say we waived the forthwith.
Well, why
And
don't
we
we wait it
can't.
for 1 month?
We
So that the
can't.
board- okay. So
Do what you have
are-
to do,
are you
we
saying
can't.
you want us to write to the court to ask for,
It's too late, it's a final decision.
I just, again, I feel you're starting on the wrong foot, and I also don't appreciate you, talking about my credentials. I do handle Article 78s routinely, so this is.
It
something that just
impairs our
happened.
right to a,
Okay, can we?
for you to not understand that it impairs our right to a forthwith decision is unfortunate.
I understand, but I don't wanna go.
It's as simple as that.
I don't wanna get into
I understand.
that, talk about that. Let's talk about your objections or your issue, or your positions on the exclusions.
Yeah, so after the last meeting, the board raised a lot of questions about. So at the last meeting, let me characterize this properly, is we identified 4 conditions, and I have them here, that we said that we would consider as conditions to the permit. One of those being limiting hauling hours, less than what we're provided for under the code. Paving the haul road where it's not currently paved, use of the haul road except under certain circumstances, and then general compliance with laws, regulations, and permit compliance. So at last meeting, the board raised a lot of questions about the weather exceptions, blasting exceptions,
Not a lot, 2 questions.
okay, how to define those things. We went back, put our heads together about it, especially on weather events. And the more we analyzed it, the more it seems that these conditions, they're just not workable. I mean, we try to define weather event as only flooding, what if a tree comes down? Blasting events, well, what if a detonator doesn't go off? And then, like, we go to blast and there's a live round in the ground, and then we have to clear out for, hours or several days. So it doesn't, we couldn't really find language that we feel that the board is going to be happy with. So we revised our list of conditions that we'd be willing to consider. And I've got those here for everybody, so we can take a look at them together. If you wanna just take that, and I put maps in there too, just to. Yeah.
So while it's helpful for the board to understand what the applicant feels to be fair conditions, I want to remind the board that it's the board's purview to decide if the board is going to issue the permit, what the appropriate conditions would be.
We fully understand that.
Yeah,
Does everybody on this board understand that? Definitely.
Yeah, and in no way by us identifying these conditions are we saying that this is all you can look at. That's, just to be clear, this is just what we offered. And particularly with the first one, the limiting the hours was really sort of kind of part and parcel with this idea of a potential future public-private partnership on the whole road that I think we touched on briefly, like limiting the hours.
Say that again, limiting the hours.
The hours of operation. So under the code, it can go, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's 7 days a week, 7 to 7.
Yeah,
And so what we were offering was a reduction of those hours.
Yes.
With keeping in mind that in the future, there could be a potential private-public partnership using the Hall Road for public, whatever, access. Bike trail or something like
And
that.
that's something that was discussed in the LWRP and is something that was, yes, brought just like
And that, that's not before the board now, but
Exactly.
it's something that we had in mind, so that's where sort of the idea for the limiting the hours came up. With respect to paving, we think that's an important part of the project, is it's obviously for dust mitigation and just for our purposes as well. That's an important aspect, and then just sort of a catch-all condition that we would apply with all permit conditions.
I don't want to interrupt, but you just gave us a copy of the code. You have.
Yeah, oh, sorry, I should have said the last page
Yeah.
is the proposed conditions. I
I
was looking at all of you fired through that, and it's the last page.
So essentially, the two conditions that we indicated, because I guess in trying to review this, right, and in contemplating this, we're trying to make sure that you're not trying to have your cake and eat it too. And that you're not on the roads. I understand that you're building it, you're paying money to build it, but it cannot be a condition where you guys are on the roads and the streets of Hudson and on your home.
So, just to be clear, that's exactly what the application is. I mean, building the Hall Road
I
is an
understand-
economic benefit for us.
I
That's
understand
why
the
we're
intent.
gonna use
I
it.
understand the intent of it.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that it has gotta be in your proposal in a fashion that I think will make the city feel comfortable, at least the planning board feel comfortable, that you're not going to be on the city streets.
And because this came up last time, and because these exceptions, as we saw from the questions last time, seemingly are just unworkable, and we just don't wanna get into a position where the city's trying to figure out how to enforce, we're trying to figure out how to comply. So what we did was JR pulled some data about sort of why we would be using the Hall Road and why the Hall Road will essentially be self-policing. In that, if we have both options, it makes no sense. It makes absolutely zero economic sense for us to be on city streets. To the extent of like $2,000 a day. If the Hall Road was open and we went on city streets in Jarrett, if I say anything that's not exactly what you said, correct me. But it's on a barge day, it's $2,000 a day we would lose by taking the city streets over the Hall Road. And what's even more important, and what we didn't touch on last time, is with the Hall Road, our customers also can use that route to go south.
You know,
And
I,
that's 20,000 trucks a year.
No, I understand it.
I wanna go back to
Yeah.
just start with small things like
Okay.
the hours operation. Is
Yeah.
the letter dated, June 2019 still in effect? It's still in effect, right?
I don't know what,
Because the hours are different here, they're proposing longer hours on this page.
It's been, that was from 2019, so that's been reduced. Well,
See,
I
they're
think they're
saying
saying-
from 7 to 5, Monday to Friday, and then Fridays from 7 to 12. And here they're saying,
76.
so I'm a little, you know,
The new
7 to
document.
5 on Fridays.
what, 7 to 6, Monday through Thursday, Friday, 7 to 5.
But I remember these hours.
Right, so
you know.
what the chair was pointing out is that in 2019, your proposal was from 7 to 5.
And that's what you went to court with and everything.
That wasn't part of the court proceeding.
Yeah.
I will tell you, by the end of
Okay, we're gonna have to
2019, our
review this.
correspondence was exactly consistent with what we have here. 7 to 5 on Friday and 7 to 6 the other days. I can go back to all that correspondence, but I remember a December 2019 letter that used those numbers.
Well, we don't have the time, but we will be looking at everything you gave me. Right now, in my opinion, there's a change.
Okay.
Because I've been keeping up with your documents, and I don't, this time looks different,
Okay, well,
okay?
that may have
But you
been,
just give it to me, I can't compare it to anything, but I will, okay?
okay.
So we
And-
move
and
on
Ms.
from that.
Madam Chair, just for, the minutes, can you repeat the date of that letter and who it was from and who it was to?
It came from John Peretera,
That's me.
yeah, McName. McNamee and Lochner, and it was dated it is dated June 10th, 2019. And is addressed to Andy Howard.
Okay. I don't know if we revisited whether we could do business within that time frame or not, but certainly by the end of 2019, it was as set forth here. And I can pull that letter.
Well,
7 to 6 and then 7 to 5. I think what's important for the board to understand is that in every one of those letters, we said we'd be willing to consider that reduction on hours as part of an otherwise legal permit. We
And now-
always said that.
And now you're saying you're willing to consider something different. So we as a board have to look at what you said one time, and now you're saying something different. So we can go up, stay on this all night, or we can just let you move on.
No.
So you get a, because some of us.
No, we can move on, we can move on, because these are the hours as proposed right now.
So let's go
These are
back.
your new
So whether,
hours
if
that
we
you're proposing.
reevaluated it, whether that letter was a typo,
Okay,
these are the
11:30,
hours.
20.
May I ask another
Yeah.
question too? It looks like the change in consideration that you're asking for too is you have added another line, maybe I overlooked it on the older documents. This time limitation does not apply to dock or mine operations, that's new.
No, we've always said that.
Well, we always said is we're reducing hauling hours. We just wanna clarify that that's not the mine or the dock, because
Or the
at the
dock.
last public meeting, a discussion came up about dock and mining operations, and then we kind of
Oh,
covered
this
that
does
because it
not
has a state
apply. Okay.
permit, it's out of the
Well,
city's
the planning board
jurisdiction.
would be without authority to regulate the
Yeah,
hours
we
of
could,
mine.
yeah.
Correct, so
But
we just
the
wanted
planning
to,
board can regulate the dock as part of the dock permit, which at some point we will review again.
Right,
But-
this is not something that
but
we're
the planning
addressing
board
for
does
this
not
meeting.
have the authority to regulate the hours of the mine or the haul road. Or no, sorry, the dock or the haul road.
We've offered it, but
Yeah.
the code says 7 to 7.
Yeah,
Okay, we're gonna fight over every word tonight.
Yeah,
again.
No,
we're
no,
not gonna do that.
The
No, no,
Because if we do, we're not gonna
just-
get.
you
does
don't have to
have the
fight, just-
ability to regulate the hours of operation if there's a
We know
reasonable
that.
basis for it as part of its review.
And we know.
Okay.
We know.
but so how would you, but how would you do that if the code allows us? I mean, you'd have to amend the code. The code says 7 to 7, 7 days a week. How could the planning board issue a permit that restricts that?
And there's nothing in the record that suggests there's an adverse impact between 6 and 7 or 5 and 7 in the evening.
Yeah.
So there's no basis for limiting the hours other than our offer.
Yeah, so
Okay.
there's
There's no-
reasonable conditions
can't do
that the planning board can put on a conditional use permit, and it's standard law.
Okay,
The two
did you-
things the planning board cannot do are limit operations or require somebody to either prohibit somebody from using city streets or require somebody from using a private road. Those were considered, but they cannot be required by the planning board. Those were our offer.
I'll give the planning board the legal advice as I move through the process.
We understand.
Appreciate your
And
comments.
it's so much with. Now, on number two. You know, I wanna ask a question this.
Yeah.
Cause I had asked this question to Ryan and I'm gonna ask it to you. How did, if you, when you. How did you guys get into, like, if you use the whole road from your plant to 9-9, right? Why can't you go left instead of right? If there's a problem with it going down to 9B.
Like,
I don't understand.
In other words, go
I think I might
left
have
all the
to
way
look
to
at that.
23, then come around.
You're talking about for the alert for the,
For, yeah, if they had a problem.
Well,
So,
the part of the whole road from 9 to 9G will never.
Never.
From 9 to 9G. It's from 9G to the dock is where the.
What the problem is with the flooding?
Yeah,
Okay, so how about building it higher?
building one higher.
That road, wherever there's gonna be problems,
Can't by DEC's, because we'll be changing the floodplain. DEC says we
So-
cannot change the elevation of that existing.
and it would be, I think it would be an enormous expense.
So as we laid out, as I laid out last time, the low point of the Hall Road is on the causeway portion. It's approximately at the culvert crossing between 9G and Front Street. And that's at an elevation that's about 2 foot lower than Front Street, the dock, entrance drive, and the 9G crossing. So that's about 2 foot lower. Now, the question being, can it be raised? Physically, you could put in 2 foot of fill, however, as it would require a modification to, the applicant has an active permit, a freshwater wetland permit from the DEC for work within the 100-foot adjacent area. So it would, require modification of that permit. Potentially, the, stormwater permit may need to be, revised. And unless the wetlands themselves were not, unless they were impacted directly, the Army Corps, lack of permit necessary would likely not change, but it would. The whole portion of the Hall Road within the 100-year floodplain does require a local floodplain development permit. Which does, as a general condition and practice, recommend against placing fill or raising grades, changing elevations within a floodplain. That said, the applicant could definitely propose that. However, a hydraulic analysis may be required. So that's all to say that physically it could be raised. However, it would require a new look at permits. And, you know, the impacts of the work where it was to be raised would have to be reassessed.
We have to,
So
do we have?
just on that point of floodplains. So if you take a look at the first thing that was attached to that packet that I handed out is a copy of the city code. And specifically in 325-17-1, which is the CR district, and goes over what are the permitted uses,
What's your name again?
TJ.
TJ, that's okay, we have an attorney here that we go with, I mean, and can we in some way, is that something that we can look at?
so normally that is something you would review as part of your project review.
Okay,
But we are in a situation where we are a little boxed in by all the reviews that have happened previously. And the question would be whether, asking for that information would allow the applicant to go run to the court and say that we are not reviewing the application that was reviewed by Greenport already. You're making changes to it. So, if the board feels strongly that you want to ask for that information.
I think the intent of the conversation is, one of your exemptions is acts of God, which is flooding, which partially that would be included in there. And so that the road be constructed in a way that would minimize the possibility that, not just now, but
Right.
in accordance.
And as I explained, because it seems like it's just, as I explained, when we try to define those exceptions, when they can be used, so both parties are comfortable, it's just not workable. So there's no exception now. So if you look at the list of conditions, we've taken that condition out.
Right, well, but it goes both ways. They've not agreed to limit themselves to using Hall Road.
Right.
So there's no exception because they're not
Right,
saying they'll just stay
exactly.
on the Hall Road.
So using the Hall Road would be promoted by it'd be self-policing based on the economic benefit that Colarusso gets from using it.
I do understand what you're saying, but to leave it to a private company
So.
to make a decision that involves the public,
Sure.
ostensibly, and say, well, we're gonna just be good actors and you can just trust us, that we're gonna do whatever's in our best economic interest.
Yeah.
That's, because if your economic interest, now, if it aligns with something different, then you might not be good actors.
Right, I can't.
Right, so
see if
what would
this
be,
is-
what would be a bad actor?
And
Well,
I'm just trying to like,
Well, let's say on a day where there was a flat on the road, let's say on the whole road, right? There was a flat, a truck.
A truck got a flat tire,
Right, disabled. And so now, are those trucks now running through the city?
well, that's another reason, when after these questions came up about blasting, weather events, we started putting our heads together about how we can make this
So now
work.
the city safety has to become secondary to your business consideration.
But if this whole road doesn't get approved, every Colarusso truck will remain on city streets. So
I understand.
even if the Hall Road was open one day a year for one truck, that's less trucks than are now. So it's still a benefit. If there's a flat tire and trucks have to be rerouted for several hours, or if we blast and trucks have to be rerouted, or if there's a flood, it's still a massive benefit to Colarusso and the city to have the Hall Road existing. That's the point of the project. It's not, what are we gonna do with the trucks for the rest of the city? And as far as leaving it to a commercial business, every commercial business in the city of Hudson, it's up to them to run their trucks on city streets, and Colarusso is no different. So,
I understand it, but I'm
Right.
saying, when we're looking at this proposal, we're trying to determine what is going to be in the best interest of the city and of the public. I understand that you're going to run less trucks in the city, but we're trying to define and in consideration of this, we're trying to define what that exactly means. And I understand what you're saying, that,
Right.
well, we're gonna do the right thing because it just economically benefits us.
right,
But I'm saying, but if that's not the case, and, it seems that we could potentially have then for any reason that you deem now, without those two exemptions, and you're saying you're not gonna put anything, for any reason that you deem reasonable,
yeah,
then you're gonna run your trucks on the street. And
right,
in the same way.
yeah.
Then
And if the Hall Road doesn't exist, then they'll be there every day. I mean, that's just the reality.
Well,
It is, but it's, the project is a benefit for Colarusso because it makes economic sense. And I understand what you're trying to say is if you're trying to get a grasp of the number, it's just, all we can say is that it's an enormous economic benefit for Colarusso, and it makes absolutely no sense to have the Hall Road open for two-way traffic and not use it. After, it's like you said, when they're loaded barges, that's $2,000 a day, plus the customers.
so just to be clear,
Yeah.
without a commitment to only use the Hall Road, when the planning board gets back to looking at the dock application, that's going to seriously change that review, because now we're not just limited to the 284 trucks. Now we have an unlimited and infinity number of trucks on city roads and the Hall Road. So
But
are you
200
sure this is?
Yeah,
sure
I'm
this is roughly
positive,
what-
because that makes no sense. When you go back to the dock operation,
You just explained that you could use both roads.
but we can put as many trucks on city streets as we want today.
Right, but.
So having the Hall Road open
Your-
doesn't
the
make that
planning board is
worse.
Also, at a future date, considering the dock operation.
Correct.
And so considering the dock operation, limited to the Hall Road is an application, but if you're saying that in fact, the planning board should be changing its review, so it's considering the dock operation for the Hall Road and an unlimited number of trucks, then I think the planning board, has to go back and take another look at their documents.
I still, I don't know, I'm not trying to be thick, I still just don't understand. The dock operation application right now, how could that include the Hall Road? The Hall Road doesn't exist.
It includes trucks to and fro the dock operation.
Okay,
And
based
so
on
the
a
basis-
traffic study.
The basis of the planning board class review, Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, when the planning board adopted the PASDAC, it was still based on the 284 truck trips
Correct.
to and from the dock operation.
Right,
So,
but today we can increase truck traffic tenfold.
That's what I'm saying.
understood, but I think what Victoria's trying to indicate is at the future date, when the dock application comes back before the board adopted a pause deck based on a maximum condition of 284 trips per day. And what's understood that this is for a different application right now, but what's being stated is that without the Hall Road, you can run an infinite amount of trucks per day. And I am not
So the existence of the
questioning,
Hall Road-
no, I'm not questioning that at all. However, I think the point being made, mainly for the planning board, is that when the dock application comes back in, if the Hall Road is not constructed if the Hall Road's not constructed and the roads are still being used, the dock application, now that 284 max trips per day, is no longer, unless the applicant then offers it as a maximum for the dock application, but it was tied in because of the Hall Road application.
Correct.
So now you would need to look at that future review of the dock with an infinite amount of potential trips. There would be no limit to truck trips at that time. However, that's something that would be,
It moots
You
your
know, it
entire
really-
argument that Greenport has reviewed this dock operation and we're stuck with this limit of 284. If you won't commit to only using the Hall Road, I think when it comes time to review the dock application, you're going to be doing a much bigger review because we have to review infinite number of trucks back and forth.
Over a dock repair?
but I think,
That's not even part of the application.
No, the
They
dock
repair the
repair triggers, no,
So-
no, no,
so
the
can we-
dock repair
can we-
triggered a full review.
excuse me,
Which is.
I think the point has been made, however, there is not a dock application before
It's
the
not
board,
before
so,
the board.
I think it would be best if we could move on from that.
Well,
Okay.
this is my.
Yeah.
You, and you've had people come on and testify that you believe that it is a hazard and unsafe that your trucks are on the road. In the city of Hudson.
We
Right?
said it's safer with them off the road.
Yeah.
Right, but you said a bus company here and they testified that the passing was difficult. And you said, and you.
I heard the bus company.
Right, and
We
you
didn't,
admitted
so we
that, and
didn't
you,
send them.
and, well, I'm just, whatever, I'm just saying that they came on your, they came here to speak and it happened to be on your behalf. And you said yourself that there was liability, that there's significant liability, that's specific, but you finished.
There's less liability on the Hall Road.
Right, so this discussion right here is to talk about those, again, those exemptions. And again, we're trying to get this from a public safety standpoint. You're
Absolutely.
looking at this from just a purely economic standpoint.
No, I'm looking at it from a public safety standpoint. At the trucks
Well,
will be safer when they're on the Hall
but
Road.
not if you turn around and say, okay, well, if we deem it for whatever economic reason, if the whole road has a problem, we're gonna be in the streets anyway. So,
Correct, like every other commercial business in the city of Hudson. Why, we're not,
but it seems to me, if you understand that there's a problem, if you understand and acknowledge that there's a problem with the trucks, right? That you would have the language in there that would want to safeguard the people here.
reducing truck traffic in the city of Hudson is an enormous step towards that goal.
I get that, but now you're saying, but that seems to be a very, unclear amount as to, it's that, the amount that you're gonna reduce it is dependent upon your feeling of what you should do
Correct,
as a business decision.
correct. Which it is today.
Okay, I wanted to give this,
I just want to be clear.
Yeah, that's crystal clear.
All right.
sir.
Just a question here. We're in a workshop, right?
Yeah.
This one, my first workshop. So question is, what is the planning board, considering for conditions? Maybe we can approach it
So
that.
I think you missed the last meeting. What the planning board asked for is they wanted an agreement to only use the Hall Road as part of it, except for local deliveries, obviously.
And without the two exclusions.
So you, originally, when this came back after the court issued the decision, the applicant said, hey, we're coming back, and we would agree to a condition that says you have to use the Hall Road, but not by acts of God, flooding, and not when we're blasting. And the planning board has been expressing concern over that, saying, well, you know, we don't control your blasting, and we just rather you stay on the Hall Road because it's safer for everyone in the city. And so as a result of that conversation at the last meeting, you've now come back and said, forget it, we're not committing to use the Hall Road.
Right.
We-
Let's just come back. I mean, we're still arguing about what the exceptions would be, and
Well, but I thought we were gonna, the working meeting was gonna be that conversation of working out their language. And it seems to me that you've come back with a proposal saying, well, this is it, take it or leave it.
it's,
And,
no, it's definitely not take it or leave it. You guys,
all right, so
like,
that we're not discussing this. You're saying, okay, we believe that you couldn't come back with language that you believe that was workable. But that's what I thought this meeting was for. That we would talk about the language of those two exemptions, all those possible exemptions, and how they would work potentially for us to consider this.
I mean, our intent to come here today for this workshop was to talk about the conditions that the board wants. Because like your attorney said, you have the ability, we're not saying these are the only things you can ever consider, you have the ability to. Whatever, I'm not gonna misquote the code, reasonable or appropriate conditions to safeguard, yada, yada. What we're saying is these are just what we were offering, and with the amount of. The lack of clarity as to when they would work, and the fact that our client would have to then be sacrificing or basically not operating. Just because something off the Hall Road, we have decided it's just not workable for us. And so,
So your answer is no.
well, what's the question?
Well, the question was about the exemptions, and your answer is no. We will not do any of those things.
I still don't understand the question.
My question clearly stated that the two exceptions that we had to consider, which was to remove the act of God and to remove, and to remove the, I'm sorry, the act of God and to remove the blasting exemption. Your answer is not only no, but it's no, and we won't agree to anything.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm
Okay, so
saying
tell me
that
what
the
you're saying.
answer is no to the exceptions. That we're not removing those exceptions because then we would have to stop operations if anything happened at the Hall Road. And it's not fair to the applicant.
Right.
It's no.
Okay,
And then, in addition to that, you're saying that you don't want any limitations on your being able to use the road as you see fit, the city streets as you see fit. Is that correct?
that's not what I'm saying.
So what do you say?
I'm saying, I mean, if you guys came up with another proposal, we would consider it. But what I said was the planning board does not have the authority to require us to use the Hall Road. That would have to come from us.
I understand that.
Okay,
That's
that's
why-
that's all.
that's why we're here.
Exactly what we're trying to get you
Yes, that's.
to
That's the whole
commit
issue.
to.
Full
That is
circle, that's why we're here.
We're trying to get you to commit to just using the Hall Road for your proposed 285.
And without exceptions, that would
And
allow,
without-
without exceptions,
without the
it's off the
exceptions,
table. That
And
we
we
will
will
say.
work out if you commit, we can work on what the exceptions can be. Because the blasting, like you said, is a business decision.
Correct.
If we look into it, maybe it can be done when you're not using the trucks, or when the trucks are not there. The flood, we're looking into that, because maybe you can build it higher, maybe you could go another way. It's so many options.
So right
The
now,
last
but
meeting, we talked about the very limited situation. It would be very rare for the road to be operational and not flooded with the dock.
so just to clear this up and make it easy, the three proposed conditions that we're offering today. Yeah,
Yeah.
I put them up, are
All
those.
the ones for today.
Those are
Yeah.
the ones that we're offering.
We got it.
If the planning
Yeah, we
board,
have that.
Okay.
Okay, so we have to
the
look
planning
at
board
this.
wants, yes, to look at that or come up with other reasonable conditions as in the purview of the planning board. Then, that's what we're here for. That's what we've been waiting for 7 years for.
Anybody else in the planning?
Well,
board?
I was just
Okay,
looking to
yeah.
finish, was that the total amount of conditions that the planning board was talking about?
That was the big
That's-
condition.
Yeah,
that
that
the
was
board
it.
was talking about.
Last meeting, and that's why we got this.
So is there any other conditions that you are proposing or we're talking about tonight?
Well, the ones he just proposed.
No, as far as the planning board, I wanna know what the planning board is.
When we proposed them, you said no.
Okay.
That's what I'm hearing.
And so that sums them up though, that's all.
At this moment, that's what we're proposing.
Staying on the all road.
Okay, because we talked about the Route 9 entrance, you know how we went through the quarry? Okay, and we come out on 9. That is the one that's opening up to the customer. Okay, and
No, we didn't talk about opening it up to your customers. You
Yeah.
had said you
Yeah.
would do that.
we're opening that up to customers
Right.
and that is a large amount of trucks that. are-
But we wouldn't, I had said at the last meeting, we have no, you know,
Yeah, right, but this is part of the benefit of this project. So in the case of, we're blasting, we've committed to just go through the 7th Street Park and jump back onto the Hall Road, come up Worth Avenue and then get back on the Hall Road and go down, and that's where the major cost is for us. And that's why we're gonna look to have that entrance open all the time. Because the first thing that'll happen to us is we're gonna have a pile of customers saying, why are we driving through the city? When are you gonna open that road back up? Okay, so we're gonna take every one of those calls. Okay, and then if in case we are loading a barge, it's a 2.5 mile around, okay? That will have to go compared to 9/10 of a mile from the scale straight to Route 9. So that's where the cost comes in. And when you say self-policing, we're gonna be the first one, because I'm somebody that answers those questions of, geez, why is this costing? When's that road gonna be open? So that's our interest in having that open all the time. And I think after that, it goes into tornadoes and hurricanes and, you know, I don't think it's gonna be an occurrence that happens very often.
I understand your intent, but it still leaves it very ambiguous as to what
Well, we can
was
talk about.
really gonna happen in real life.
Okay, so we can talk about how to work that out.
But if the whole road doesn't get approved, they will stay on city streets.
And I understand that.
So the unclarity, I just find it, I don't see why that would be a reason to either not grant or a reason to deliberate further. If any reduction is beneficial, then why doesn't it just stop there? Like, we're not getting, like, it's almost like we're paying the city, you want us to pay for the benefit that we're gonna get for the whole road. That's what it seems like. Because if we're getting, if trucks are off the streets, the trucks are off the streets. So if we use 50% of the time or 100% of the time, what's the difference?
okay. So, Bettina, you have, Bettina and either one of you guys.
Well, I was thinking about specifications, if we're gonna be productive and like try and find a middle ground. But because with the blasting events, of course, we don't want them ever on the city streets, but if you have to, I'm wondering if there's like certain limits, like 10 blasting events a year, you can use the city streets, but after that, and I know it varies, but I'm just wondering if there's certain specifications and things like that
Can we do
we
that?
can think about.
Like,
Sure, I mean, that's
Time
what,
limits.
that was something.
One blasting event a
Yeah.
month, like I'm not sure.
Or can we redirect them?
Where would you redirect them to?
I don't know, I have to
Is
look.
that
at
where you're
maps.
saying when you go left and then?
Yeah, well, that was, that wouldn't take care of blasting, because they're coming, blasting is coming from the actual quarry.
Right.
So, you know, I didn't look at the quarry and see if there's another way, but they said it wasn't another way. We were by the wall
Mhm.
and they were blasting all the way. the
Well,
other way.
you say a set amount of maximum exemptions.
Yeah,
Yeah, in other words, set a limit to.
so then we know like the
Time.
trucks will be on the road maybe 5 times a year because of blasting events, but it won't go over that because. it'll be
And then we can also propose other routes, take a look at that, you know,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Do you know how many times you tend to blast a year?
Well, we're all talking about that location, so.
Yeah.
Is there any other location in the quarry? Because we did go
Mhm.
and you said it wasn't, but is there a possibility of any other way the trucks getting out of the quarry?
No, not, when we're blasting in that area, that would shut them, just for safety.
And that's the area you're active in.
Yes, yeah. that's-
When will you be moving out of that? area?
That's in our mining plan now. They're 5-year terms, so that would be about.
How long have you been in there? So how many more years do you have?
We,
Been in there since 1980.
oh no, in the,
In
In
that
the
part.
area that, yeah, in the area that's gonna affect the truck movement.
yeah, there's a lot of stone in there.
1980 is when we started that. We started that whole quarry right there, so.
And you have until You said 5 years.
It's 5 years.
Well,
terms,
you
so it's part
update.
of your life of mine.
Yeah.
So to be clear, the issue with, and I know
40 years.
you're not saying a limit, just to be clear, on blasting events.
No, it's.
Yes.
That's what we're saying.
You're
Oh,
saying-
we can't limit how many blasting
or-
events they have,
No,
we
but-
just limit the amount of blasting events where you're allowed to divert trucks.
Exactly.
to the street.
Exactly. We're talking about
As
that.
a, rather,
Right, but
yeah.
the planning board. I mean, if you're
Look,
asking,
look, we understand the parameters that the board cannot keep trucks off a public street, which is why we're having this discussion, right? We want you to volunteer as part of your permit so that it's now enforceable because it's something you're proposing. That the trucks will come off the streets and stay on the Hall
but
Road.
why would we do that?
Why would you do that? Why would you?
But you're
do that?
saying we can't require it, we want you to volunteer it. But we're
Yes.
saying that there's a huge economic benefit for us not to use the city.
Because you're saying this in the public interest, and you're saying, I
So is the
want this
planning
as
board
in the
saying
public
we
interest,
gotta
but
agree
if
to
we don't
remove
make
our
money,
trucks?
then it's all right to be in the streets. Am I incorrect in that?
Is what the planning board saying, if the concern is that the economic benefit is not enough for the plan.
No, don't put words in the planning board. mouth. The planning board, you've been saying, everyone's been saying this is a public safety issue. And the board is very concerned about public safety, and so if they're going to approve this Hall Road, which goes through a sensitive wetland area to the dock. You know, they wanna make sure that the Hall Road is going to actually be used by your client.
We wanna
And they want to get the trucks off the street.
minimize.
That's part of the LWRP, even though the LWRP wasn't fully adopted, it's part of the comp plan. The whole idea of economic justice, getting the trucks out of that neighborhood. I mean, this
So,
is not,
and I
this isn't
think-
a new concept.
I think what it goes to is, you know, the city code, when it talks about conditional uses, so the Hall Road is a use that's permitted, it's a conditional use in this district. For applications looking for conditional uses, and quoting the code. For any conditional uses specified in this chapter, in approving any such use, the planning board shall take into consideration the public health, safety, welfare, the comfort and convenience of the public in general, and of the residents of the immediate neighborhood in particular, and may prescribe appropriate conditions, et cetera, et cetera.
No, can you finish? please?
Oh, appropriate conditions and safeguards as may be required in order that the result of its action to the maximum extent possible, further the expressed intent of this chapter and the accomplishment of the following objectives in particular. And then there's a list of objectives.
Correct.
And we can go, you know, we can look at those objectives. And I think what the planning board is saying is that in potentially approving a conditional use, that they see that there would be a consideration for public health, safety, welfare, et cetera, if there were no gravel trucks on city streets.
So
Hold on,
what I'm saying
I'd
is,
also like to
what's
just read
before
from the
board-
LWRP for a moment. Again, well, the LWRP, we understand it's not fully in effect, but use of the causeway will eliminate dump traffic through the city's most disadvantaged and densely populated neighborhood. Use the word eliminate, not reduce. Thereby providing significant health, safety, and environmental benefits for the community. Further, the city views the use of the causeway by commercial vehicles as a temporary measure to immediately eliminate truck traffic traversing the residential neighborhood. So again, the concept is elimination of truck traffic through city streets.
Of the LWRP. That very well may be, but what's before the board is the Hall Road. Whether the Hall Road as a use is a public safety concern. What's not before the board is our use of city streets.
We're aware, which is why we're asking you to commit to get
But all the
trucks
concern
off the
is-
city
It
streets.
doesn't seem that the board is aware, because all the concern is about the public safety issues that the trucks are currently posing on city streets. That's not
No,
what's
the
before
board
the
is
board.
asking you to commit to using the Hall Road as part of your application. That's been the question. That's what we're here to discuss.
So is that a condition is that what the whole, because
The
without,
board hasn't voted on anything yet. This is the tenor of the discussion and the questions that have been asked to you.
And none of this have changed, this is very consistent, so we haven't changed these conversations, and I
Right.
knew why.
and so you're looking for a commitment that Colarusso never puts trucks on city streets and only uses the Hall Road.
Well,
For,
that's,
for access to and from the dock.
Correct, and as we've explained, without exceptions, that's off the table, because the planning board cannot require us. We're not going to limit our business because we can use the Hall Road.
So that's why we were talking, one of the members asked about coming up with a reasonable condition. Can you agree to 10 times a year for blasting? I mean, the flooding, Ryan can go back and talk about flooding, but it's,
Well, it's not-
There's very limited, it would appear that there's very limited situations where the causeway will be flooded, but the dock will not be flooded. So, you know, whether the applicant can propose a alternative contingency route that would use the Hall Road through 9G and then on city streets to the dock. Or to say that, you know, given the you know, unlikelihood of flooding being within that range, perhaps there's no, you know, understood that nobody can predict what flooding events we have, but perhaps there really is not a need for that contingency route. If there is, though, can the Hall Road be used to a greater extent than what's currently, what was previously proposed as a contingency route?
And can it be, now we're talking about the part of the whole road just before you get to 9G.
So in reality, the concern with flooding is the causeway portion between 9G and Front Street
Okay.
only. I mean, it will, the Hall Road would potentially flood, east of 9G. However, at the point that it floods east of 9G, it appears that the dock itself would be inaccessible and the dock entrance road would be underwater. So they don't have any place to go at that point, so
We shouldn't be.
there's not a need to, it does not appear that there's a need to use entirely city streets to access the dock in that situation. They could potentially drive to 9G using the Hall Road, come up Third, the current route would be Third Columbia Front to the dock in that situation. Then once floodwaters reach a certain elevation, that the dock and the rest of east of 9G is flooded, there would be no use by you know, the fact that the dock's flooded.
right, you can't fill the barges and the docks with water.
Yeah.
But I guess we're saying, if you're saying that there's probably, you know, if there's gonna be a minimum amount of flooding, and you know what your blasting schedule is. If you would commit to putting in this document a maximum amount of days that you'll be on there. So we would have, so at least the document wouldn't be ambiguous as to how often you could be on there. It would give a level of clarity that I think that would be helpful to us.
Okay, well, we can
We
discuss
can
that.
propose that.
We can discuss that.
I agree with that. We can kind
Yeah.
of propose that.
Oh, we
You give
can't
us the-
regulate the mind.
You give us the information.
Yeah, I
Right.
understand. We're just saying number of days.
Number of exceptions.
Yeah,
Exactly,
yeah, you
exactly.
give us the information and then from the information we receive, we can kind of figure out what's best for.
And there are other acts of God that perhaps we can't even imagine. I mean, what if it's,
Like what?
well, the last time the causeway was underwater was Irene.
Nobody was out.
What if it was Irene times 2 with a tornado and a piece of the Hall Road got blown up?
And you think
I think you'll be working.
I mean, I think.
No, after the water recedes, that's why lawyers for centuries have relied on force majeure clauses instead of trying to define it.
All right,
If they're acts of gods or things beyond the control of the parties, then X. That's what we're talking about here. There's standard clauses that have been used for a long time. And we have an economic interest. It's actually $2,180 a day. That's how much we crunch the numbers. We're doing this and have endured for 7 years because there's value to us having the Hall Road. We're going to be using it, but we can't regulate the mine. We can't anticipate every event when we can't use the road. I understand what you're driving at, but the idea that we might schnooker everybody and have an idle Hall Road and use the city road that's like saying, you know, Stewart's building and not opening. Or, you know, there's no, expect that capitalism is going to drive compliance here.
But as a lawyer,
I
You
was-
don't deal in ambiguity, right?
That's why we use force majeure clauses, right?
I understand that. But why would you want us to accept ambiguity?
No, I'm saying,
Well, it's just.
it's not ambiguity. What's ambiguous about that?
Because you're saying, basically, without that, what you're presenting is that you're gonna use the city streets however you see fit, whenever you see fit.
We're saying we can do that.
Yeah.
And we're saying-
That's what your application, that's what you're saying in the application. You can use this, however, whenever, and however long as you want to, you can use the streets. The
Yeah.
city streets.
Yes.
And obviously, that's a major concern to us. So, yeah, I know that you
But,
understand.
but, but
our
you-
position.
but you
But
have,
that's not a part of the review of the Hall Road.
Right.
It's like, the concern about
It's-
Colarusso being on the city streets is the exact issue the Hall Road solves.
But does it?
And when you're reviewing the
But
Hall,
does it?
well, yeah, because one day of being on the Hall Road is trucks not being on the city streets for a day.
I get that.
and the exceptions we're talking about are tiny.
Right,
Well, they could be tiny, but they could be giant loopholes as well, and that was the
How?
But
concern,
that's-
is that they were
How?
very large loopholes, and so.
So if there was a tornado on the uplands.
Who are you?
Between Bob Colarusso,
Oh, okay, sorry.
9G and 9. Tornado came through, like down, just south of the quarry, Finger Road this past summer. Was devastated for a week. It was impassable. We need to use the city streets. If that upland parcel is, a tornado went through there. I don't know how else, we can't just shut down because a tornado came through, or do you expect us to? I don't know.
So
Force majeure is for.
that's what we were talking about with Act of God originally, but then you've been
Well,
Act of God.
well,
to
originally-
Mining, which
Originally, it was,
kind of,
when we said, well, when we're
That
blasting,
Yes.
we restricted it to an hour to the dock, and then we sat down and put our heads together and we said, you know what? That could not be good for us, because what if there a tornado came through? Now we're done for, a week, I don't know how long it's gonna
and
take.
sometimes the blasts don't go off.
Right, and I've seen that happen 2 times in my lifetime, twice, right? And
So-
today, and that could take weeks.
Wait a minute, so if you,
I think we need to
yeah,
separate Acts of God from blasting. 'cause they're two
Okay,
different
so
topics.
blasting is
yeah, because I'm,
an incident where, they call it a misfire.
meaning you
They
set the
don't-
detonator, but it
All the
doesn't.
detonators don't go off, and now it's in a pile with live dynamite in there, right? So now mine safety comes in and they're in there and it's not a fun job. They're in there, they're looking for these blasting caps and these boosters, okay? And it's a very time consuming problem.
So that means you wanna run this, your truck, you don't want your trucks to stop. for
I
that
can't,
amount.
well, I can't, no, I can't go through, I can't go past that incident, right? It's a safety issue. So when we limit ourselves to 1 hour during a blast, it's devastating to us.
Well, now you're telling us information that we didn't have before.
But,
That's good to
okay,
know.
and that's what we're trying to get through. So to put a limit of an hour on us going through the city streets, we just cannot accept that. Act of God, we cannot accept that. Other than that, like JR did, he did it.
But that is what you wrote though. That was what you originally.
Well, we
Well, we did,
originally,
but then when you started saying, well, that's
Okay,
a
so
problem.
you do agree that you
He
originally.
said that, and then you said, well, that's gonna be a problem. Well, that's a big problem for us if it's more than an hour. You understand?
Well,
and
we
as a
understand it
business
better now,
decision,
yeah.
We're like, whoa, because it's like you guys don't want the whole road. And I don't know why, I really don't. It's 8 I know why, because some of the people just don't want us down there, but at the end of the day, it's a huge benefit for the city of Hudson, and it's a benefit to us too.
But it's not that, it's really a very simple thing.
And it is.
We don't wanna give the whole road and also allow you to be on the streets of Hudson. We want one or the other. And we wanna work it out
So
to
how
get
can we
one.
have one or the other if,
We're trying to, that's what we're trying to
Okay,
work out. We're
right.
talking about, that there's problems with blasting. I never heard that before.
Okay.
Until just now.
well,
Okay.
we talked about it amongst ourselves,
Right.
and we're like, well, they'll never go without,
Okay, but
we
you
gotta
need
put
to
a
talk to
restriction.
us so we can, yeah.
Well, we've never had an
I
open
think
workshop
you
like
just
this
stick the
either.
dynamite in and it goes off, but you're saying
We've
something.
never had an open workshop like that.
Right.
So,
So these are things that we have to
Yep,
consider,
yep.
all right? And then I was thinking that, okay, you can rebuild the road to make it so that it can minimize the flooding or limit it or get rid of it all by redoing the road.
I think
But,
that's,
The
it's
code
saying
doesn't
none of
allow
that.
that. by the
We're not
way.
talking about the code, is what
yeah,
we are
I'm gonna say
proposing,
we would not,
okay? We have a right to propose it, whether the.
No, the code says we can't. Code
Okay.
says we can't.
As we were saying, can't propose
Well,
what they
you
do.
can't change
The code says we can't change the height of the causeway.
But you are, I mean, you are changing it as part of the
But
project.
you,
So-
well,
let's,
no, we're
let's,
actually filling it out.
Let me get back to what I'm saying.
But those are the act of God,
Or we can do, look at other,
So
routes.
it was, the purpose, what the planning board thought was going to be today was you coming back with ideas of how to make these conditions workable.
Exactly.
Instead you came back and said, we're
well,
not.
they were all
that.
saying, we can't live in 1 hour and you never see our
Well, that
trucks.
was just something that was
So,
to
our
propose
meeting's
today,
gonna have
we
to
didn't do
end.
that the last minute. We, at the
Well,
last
one
meeting, we
hour?
didn't propose
So
limit,
1
time
hour.
limits, I think,
You might wanna
maximum
consider,
standards for that.
you might wanna consider,
Oh, hold on.
if you did
Let me
a
up, let me up.
maximum
Oh,
exception
let me up.
meeting and, yeah,
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh, we gotta stop.
What's that?
Yes.
I'm just saying.
Unfortunately, we have members that have to leave. It wasn't intended to be this long, so we're gonna have.
And what would, force majeure?
It's 5:17.
Maximum number of blasting?
Yes, and.
Then-
Without a time.
Without timing, but the force, I mean, you might want
Not
to.
number of blasting,
Please don't let me have a form.
And so that's,
Okay.
I mean, I also think there's
If that's the bridge, we'll walk on that.
something with, I mean, there's always wording we can use as well, where if you talk to the code enforcement officer about some prolonged closure, put them on notice. I mean, if we're trying to avoid a situation where there's just unfettered discretion to use both roads.
To use the dock, yeah, the road and the street.
And I don't know, I guess I'm asking Jake or TJ, I think we're still offering the 142 limits, right? To the dock.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, that's not all, okay, well, that's still.
unofficial meeting now?
Yes.
It's now unofficial, we don't have a forum.
Okay, should I get a close?
Let's make it clear, yeah.
Yeah,
No,
so I'm closing the meeting.
Well, we should decide whether you wanna have another workshop with the applicant, whether they're gonna come back in December. I mean, they've taken a position.
Well,
But
a condition that we really can't live with, restricting our business 1 hour.
I'm gonna say that we just hold our meeting on the on December the 12th, and this is up to the board. And if we can't come with a conclusion or a decision or get somewhere, we just, what can we do? We're not gonna be forced into a decision. It's gotta be something that we all understand what we're doing. And, you're looking out for your business and we're looking out for the whole, the public and the future of Hudson, the impacts of the future of Hudson. And
so
so it'll just stand until on the 12th, what they're gonna do.
come back in December. Do you wanna, after, you wanna do a workshop?
A workshop.
Again?
No,
Yeah.
Yeah,
but
we need a
we're not
workshop.
holding. We have a whole lot of stuff with this. So I think we have a regular meetings with them on it.
Mhm.
And then if we need another meeting after we may have to do what you said, go to the judge and ask one time, whatever we have to do. And then we'll have a.
I'll talk to them.
Yeah.
Get outside counsel.
In other words, the 12th is gonna be our regular meeting, because we have other applicants.
Right, but what I was asking was, as part of the regular meeting, do you wanna go into a workshop format?
Oh, yes, we could do that at the 12th meeting, but with everybody else, all the
You
other.
have to make a motion to close the meeting, though.
Oh, do it?
I mean, it kind of closed by.
I mean, it closed, but yeah, you should make a motion. If
Okay.
it's less than a quorum can adjourn the
Yes.
meeting.
Okay, what time did he leave? A couple of minutes ago?
5:17.
Okay,
So
can I
make a
get
motion?
may I have a motion to close the meeting at 5:17?
I'll make a motion.
And I'll second it.
All in favor? Okay, the meeting is closed at 5:17. Everything else is being done is unofficial.